By 2006, cracks had already begun to appear in the U.S. economy, but most people didn't notice them or simply ignored them. The cause of the 2008 financial crisis was on its way. The impetus for the crisis was the sale of unregulated investment derivatives over the past 10 years. Mortgage-backed securities (MBS) were a major factor in the financial collapse. Mess arise when a bank makes a loan to a home buyer. The bank holds the mortgage loan for 2 to 3 years and then sells it to Fannie Mae to get additional funds to make new mortgages. Fannie Mae then bundles several mortgages together and resells them in what is called the secondary market. This bundle of mortgages is called a mortgage-backed security. The value of the MBS depends on the value of the mortgages bundled together, because of the ease with which banks can sell their mortgages to Fannie Mae. Banks are willing to make riskier loans to home buyers. Many of these mortgages are interest-only or adjustable rate loans. And when the U.S. Federal Reserve began raising mortgage interest rates between 2004 and 2006, many homeowners found that they could no longer afford their homes. When the number of mortgage defaults reached critical mass, the housing bubble burst, disrupting the global economy. Part 1. Asheville, North Carolina. Chapter 1. December 12, 2006. It was another boring Christmas party. It was the third time I'd been to the year-end party at Thompson & Associates, a brokerage and investment firm. The food was great and the drinks were flowing, but the conversation around the table was of no interest to me. My name is Tom Mayfield, and I wasn't working at TNA, but was at a +1 party for my wife, Michelle. Michelle, who almost everyone who knows her calls. Mickey is my wife of 3 years and one of the top salespeople at TNA. So Mickey, when are you going to start putting your clients' money into the latest Miss products? Bob Ford, one of Mickey's friends in the office, asked if I wouldn't put my money into any of these products, and I won't offer my clients anything. I wouldn't invest in myself, replied Mickey. Your clients are missing out on an opportunity to make a lot of money, said Mark Henry, Mickey's supervisor. You should get into these products now, before profits start to dwindle like that's ever going to happen, said Leon Goldberg. The Miss Market is the gift that never stops giving. Leon was the best salesperson in the office. I sat only half listening to the conversation, but I wondered why Mickey was holding back from investing our money in something that produced such high returns. I had no idea what Miss was, and I didn't want to make a fool of myself and embarrass Mickey in front of the people she worked with. So I kept my mouth shut and decided to wait until we got home to ask her why she hadn't heeded Mark and Leon's advice. Let me tell you that Mickey knows more about financial planning and investment strategies than the professors who taught her these subjects in college. I, on the other hand, know nothing about these things and leave our financial planning and investment decisions to Mickey. When we got home that evening, I asked, "What are Miss, and if they are so profitable, why aren't we investing in them?" Miss are mortgage-backed securities, and I have a bad feeling about them. I see danger signs in these markets, and I think there could be big problems, said Mickey. If that's true, why do Mark and Leon rate them so highly, said I. They're so focused on the profits they're making that they refuse to believe anything bad could happen. What do you think should happen, said I. I think these moves are a time bomb. That's about to go off, and when it does, the housing market will collapse, said Mickey. How bad could it be? I think it could bring down the entire U.S. economy. I thought about what Mickey had told me for a moment, and realized that I would trust her opinion more than Mark and Leon's. Then another thought occurred to me. I was working as a project manager for a home building company in Jacksonville, and was busy building homes all over North Florida. How would all this affect my job? All I can say is that you should start looking for a job in another industry, Mickey said. I intend to do the same when the bubble bursts. TNA is going to be in big trouble, and I don't want to be there when that happens. Mickey said Mickey couldn't say when the housing market bubble will burst. She said it could happen in another 2 to 3 years, or maybe sooner. Trusting Mickey's opinion, I decided not to wait for the bubble to burst and sent my resume to a job search company. For 9 months, I received no job offers. Bill Ferguson, an agent for the headhunter I hired, told me that the labor market was already showing signs of an impending recession. In October 2007, Ferguson called me and told me he had a possible job offer for me. How would you feel about moving to Asheville, North Carolina? I don't know, I'd have to discuss it with my wife. What kind of job? Said I, a job with Standard Auto Services Corporation. They're in the auto repair business. They build car service centers and then sell them to franchisees. They need project managers to oversee the construction of new centers. The starting salary will be about $2,000 less than you're making now. But there's room for growth. Sounds interesting, but how much traveling will you have to do? Right now, they're building centers in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, so there will be a lot of traveling involved. How reliable is this company? The economy is starting to look bad. Can they survive a recession? This is a question Mickey advised me to ask any potential employer. She fears that any project management position in the construction industry can be risky. The person I talked to said that these service centers will be needed if there is a recession. If people can't buy new cars, they will need inexpensive places to service their old cars. Bill said I told Bill that I would discuss this suggestion with Mickey and call him back in the morning. When I got home that evening, Mickey was in the kitchen cooking fried chicken. The first dish Mickey made for me was fried chicken. Her grandmother had given her the recipe, and it was the first time she had tried it. It turned out to be the best fried chicken I had ever eaten, and it became my favorite dish. I waited until we cleaned up the kitchen to tell Mickey about the job offer from Standard Auto Services Corporation. I thought she would resist when I told her that we would have to move to Asheville, North Carolina if I took the job. Asheville is supposed to be a great neighborhood, Mickey said. When do you have to start? They want me to start the first of the month. I said, that will only give us 3 weeks. I'll have to notify TNA and contact all my clients to let them know I'm leaving. It will take me more than 3 weeks to prepare for the move. So you don't mind going to Asheville? I said, like I said, the coming troubles will ruin TNA and definitely leave you out of a job. This job offer sounds good, but let me do a little research on the company. If the company looks good, I think you should take it. That evening, Mickey spent 2 hours on the computer researching SAC and told me that the company looked solid with a good business plan and that I should take their offer. Chapter the 2nd of October, 2007. During the last week of October, I moved to Asheville and found a 2-bedroom apartment for us while Mickey stayed in Jacksonville to handle the sale of our house and notify her clients that she was leaving TNA. Mickey told her former clients that they could sign with one of TNA's other brokers or transfer their business to another broker. Mickey also sent out her resume to brokers around Asheville, and she was able to get a job with a broker who had just opened an office in Asheville. It took a month to sell a house that was a hot market just a few months ago. We had to drop the price by $5,000 to close the deal, but we still made money on the sale. When Mickey finally arrived in Asheville, I was working at 2 SAC service centers in western North Carolina, so I could be home every night. We spent the next 4 months having a great time exploring the neighborhood. In the spring of 2008, Mickey and I bought a house that had been foreclosed on. It was the first house built in a new neighborhood, planned 11 miles north of the city of Asheville, on the west bank of the French Broad River. The house on Chandler Road stood on a hill overlooking the river, and was the only one built in the neighborhood before the builders went bankrupt. It was a large wooden colonial house with a basement, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage. We liked the house, and thought it would be perfect for raising a family, but it took us a while to get used to the quiet. Since we were so far away from the nearest neighbors, Mickey's new job wasn't much different from the work she was doing at TNA in Jacksonville. She quickly grew her client list, and even had some of her previous clients seek her out. In January, the 2 projects I was managing were completed, and I took on 2 more. But in Tennessee, I was now spending 3 or 4 nights a week away from home. It was difficult, but the plan was to work this job until the housing market improved, at which point I could get back into the home building business. After 4 years at SAC, my business was doing well. The company was expanding and I was spending more time away from home. But Mickey never complained. While I was traveling all over the Carolinas and Tennessee, Mickey was using her skills as an investment advisor to make plans to start a family and retire young. Chapter the 3rd of March, 2012. Returning home for a 4-day weekend after a 3-week absence, I met a very serious Mickey at the door, Tom. I've been thinking about starting a family for a long time, but our current financial situation isn't yet in line with what I'd like to have. But I have a new investment opportunity that will help us get where we want to be in about 2 years. If we do this, we can start our family and I can be a stay-at-home mom. You know me. I don't know anything about investing. I'm just a hammer and nails guy. I trust your judgment when it comes to investing our money. So what is this grand idea? And how confident are you that it's a good opportunity? I don't want to say yet. I met an investment consultant at a seminar I attended a couple months ago, and we discussed the idea for a few weeks. He has experience in this kind of investment, and he likes my idea. His name is Dave Nesbitt, and he's coming over tonight to discuss the possibility of pooling our money so we can take advantage of this opportunity before someone else does. Is this your idea or his mine? I just discussed the idea with Dave to see what he thought, and he came to love it and thinks we can pull it off. We can more than triple our investment. That means more money. Honey, it sounds like you want to put most of our money into the deal. Are you sure that's a reasonable risk? Yes, I think so. Let's wait until Dave gets here and I'll explain what the deal is and how much we need to put in to make it work. I heard a car pull up in our driveway and went out to meet Nesbitt, who arrived in a red 2010 Corvette. I was a little jealous because I had always liked Corvettes, but I always drove a truck like my Ford F-150 with four-wheel drive because it was necessary for my job. As we shook hands, I sized him up and guessed he was doing the same to me. Nesbitt was about my height, 6 feet, 2 inches. His brown hair was shorter and darker than mine, and he had a mustache. He had a friendly smile, and when he spoke, I noticed a slight accent I couldn't identify. When we entered the house, I asked him where he was from. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but spent 10 years in Cincinnati before moving here. He said Reds or Phillies. I asked Pirates when Nesbitt and I entered the living room. Mickey was already coming from the kitchen carrying a tray with 2 mugs of beer, a glass of white wine, and appetizers. I see you two have already met so we can get started, Mickey said. Mickey looked at Dave and said, I haven't told Tom about our plan yet, so I'll do it now. I was working with one of my clients a month ago, and he mentioned that he owned a natural gas drilling company in Oklahoma, and told me that one of his competitors wanted to start producing in North Carolina. The state legislature recently approved fracking in the state, and they plan to allow companies to start drilling here next year. He told me that in a few months, his competitor will probably start contacting property owners and making deals with them to start producing gas on their property. After talking to him, an idea occurred to me. You can't legally explore, extract, or sell minerals under the surface of the earth, including natural gas, unless you own the mineral rights to the area or have a lease with the owner of those rights. I did a little research and found out that if we can get to the owners first and buy out their mineral rights, the drilling company will have to get those rights from us. If they want to produce natural gas, they will have to pay us for the privilege. This could be a very lucrative deal for us. As soon as Mickey finished, Nesbitt entered the conversation. When Mickey told me about her idea, I did my own research, and she was right. We can buy the gas rights under the land without buying the lot. I think we could easily triple our investment if we rushed into it. I trusted Mickey's judgment, but I had no reason to trust Nesbitt, so I didn't know what to think. It seemed risky to me. Why would any of these property owners sell us their mineral rights? Said I. That's the beauty of it. Most landowners don't own the mineral rights that lie beneath their land. Often those rights were bought decades ago. I checked public records and found that most of the mineral rights in the area we are considering are owned by one family. I contacted Daniel Owen, the head of that family, and asked if they would be interested in selling us their mineral rights. Mr. Owen told me that they would be interested in selling the rights to us for the right price. He said his great-grandfather's family owned most of the land in the area, and when they sold it, the family retained the mineral rights in case oil was discovered in the area. But that never happened, Nesbitt said. I got the impression that Mickey and Nesbitt were determined to carry out the plan, with or without my consent. Again, I trusted Mickey's judgment, so I told her I would agree to anything she suggested. If we do this, how much will it cost us? I asked. We'll put in $500,000 and Dave will agree. That's enough to buy the mineral rights from the Owen family. That's a lot of money. Are you sure you want to do this? Said I. It's too good an opportunity to pass up, said Mickey, and Nesbitt nodded his head in agreement. What do we need to do now? Said I. We need to sign a partnership agreement, and I need your power of attorney to act on your behalf when you're out of town, said Mickey, holding out a stack of papers for me to sign. I think I signed 7 different documents. As soon as Nesbitt left, Mickey dragged me onto the bed, and we got down to it. Monday morning, I headed back to Tennessee with a bad feeling about Mickey dragging us into this business deal with Nesbitt. I don't know if I felt that way because I didn't trust Nesbitt, or if it was about the money we were pouring into this endeavor. Probably both. There was another thing that bothered me. Even though the fun Mickey and I were having over the weekend was fantastic, she never once said, "I love you." Earlier, when we made love, Mickey had confessed her love to me, several times. Chapter 4, April 2012. 3 weeks later, when I arrived home for the weekend, I wasn't greeted as warmly as I expected. Mickey kissed me on the cheek and asked me how my work was going, but showed no interest in my answer. Then I asked her how our business plan was going. I thought she would be happy to tell me about it, but I was wrong. It's going about as well as we thought it would, was all she said on the subject. All weekend, Mickey seemed a little distant, and when I tried to question her about it, she said irritably, "It's no big deal. I'm just tired. And you not being home all the time doesn't help." Well, she telling me that she missed me and didn't like that I was away so often? Or was she blaming me for her mood because I was away so often? I didn't know how to feel about it. I had no love that weekend for the first time since we'd been married. I was glad I was going back to Tennessee on Monday, and Mickey had been cold to me during our phone conversations during the first week I was away. But after that, she warmed up a little, but continued to deny that anything was wrong because of her behavior. I began to worry about the state of our marriage. I called home at various times when I knew Mickey should be home, and she answered every time I called. The fact that Mickey was home when I called helped, but her attitude on the phone didn't alleviate my concerns. I often got the impression that she was annoyed by my calls, but she never said so. Thinking that the problem was that I was away so often, I made more of an effort to keep Mickey happy. When I was home, but without much success. Months went by, and Mickey's attitude didn't change. Chapter the 5th of January, 2013. It was the middle of January, and I was getting ready to head home for the long weekend, so I called Mickey to let her know what time I was heading out. This time, Mickey seemed happy to talk to me. We chatted for a minute, and then Mickey said, "FYI, it snowed 3 inches overnight. It didn't fall any more today, but it's been cloudy all day, and the temperature hasn't gotten above freezing. Be careful because a lot of the roads here are icy." It surprised me that her tone was more loving than it had been lately. Maybe Mickey was done with whatever was tormenting her. It was already dark when I approached the house, but I could see that there was still snow on the driveway. My attention was drawn to the tire tracks in the snow leading to the garage door. The tracks were too wide to be tracks from Mickey's Honda and led to the door on my side of the garage. After parking the car in the garage, I went outside to take another look at the tracks. There was only one set of tracks, and since there was no other car in the garage, the tracks were made by someone driving out of the garage and down the driveway. That meant that the tracks were made by a car that had been parked in the garage before it snowed, and the width of the tire tracks made me think of Nesbitt's Corvette. Mickey greeted me in the kitchen with a kiss and seemed happy to see me, but I wasn't sure. I was happy to see her. I didn't mention the footprints in the snow. I wondered if she would tell me who had spent the night with her. I asked her if she had been out in the snow, and she said no. Chapter the 6th of February, 2013. When I left for work on Monday, I was pretty sure Mickey was having an affair, and suspected it was Nesbitt entertaining. My wife. But before I said anything to her, I had to find out for sure. I decided to go home for the weekend a week earlier than usual, and didn't say anything to Mickey. I took Thursday off, rented a car, and traveled 500 miles in 7.5 hours. Arriving home at 6:15 p.m., I parked the rental car in a vacant lot a quarter-mile down the road and walked back to the house. I looked in the garage. Mickey's car was in place, but there were no lights on in the house. I went into the house and turned off the alarm, and then took a quick look around, seeing nothing to confirm or deny my suspicions. I turned the alarm back on and went down to the basement to wait for Mickey to come home. I wanted to see if Mickey was out with Nesbitt and confront them, if he came with her. I heard Nesbitt's Corvette before he even pulled up in the driveway, so I walked over to the kitchen door to listen to their conversation as they entered the house. I waited for the right moment to interrupt their party, but froze when I heard them talking. "I don't know why you keep berating yourself. It's not your fault he chose to do that, and he didn't care how much it hurt you." Nesbitt said, "I know, but isn't there another way to deal with it?" "Well, you could file for divorce and claim he committed adultery, which would take at least 6 months. And that would mean we couldn't be together until the divorce was granted. If he finds out we were together, he can countersue. And you lose the benefit of the doubt. And after all that, you'll only get half of everything. And we need everything to do what we want to do. Under my plan, you'll get everything. And after he dragged you here away from your friends and your old job, don't you think you're entitled to everything?" I wasn't dragging Mickey anywhere. We both agreed that moving to Asheville was the right move for us. I was having a hard time digesting what I was hearing. Mickey thinks I cheated on her. Where the heck did she get that idea? And she wants to divorce me to be with Nesbitt. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I didn't care about the divorce, which was a foregone conclusion after I found out she was cheating on me. If she thought I was having an affair, why didn't she tell me about it? She didn't care enough about it to seek out the truth. But wouldn't I be the first person they'd suspect? Said Mickey. Suspect her of what? What the heck are they planning? These thoughts were spinning around in my head like a pinwheel. I had to force myself to focus on their words, which wasn't easy in my state of mind. Who will even know he's gone when I become Tom Mayfield? No one will look for him, and his body will never be found. Then we'll sell this house and move to California. I can become so much like Tom that I'll impersonate him when I get my driver's license in California. Then we'll be free. I thought, oh crap. They're planning to kill me, and Nesbitt is planning to take over my life. Why would he want to become me? What advantage will that give him? Okay, then when are we going to do it? Asked Mickey. We'll do it after he files your taxes. We don't want any trouble with the IRS, and he should have his annual bonus by then. I'll take care of everything, and all you'll have to do is keep him fooled and happy until we're ready, Nesbitt said. I was stunned. I thought Mickey loved me, but I had just heard her on the other side of the door, plotting my death with that crap. Nesbitt and I was still standing on the basement stairs when I heard Mickey set off the alarm. Now, I was in a tight spot because I couldn't leave the house without setting off the alarm. That would alert them that someone was in the house. I walked back down to the basement and sat in an old chair, trying to make sense of what I had heard. I had never cheated on Mickey. How could she believe I had? Is she, along with Nesbitt, plotting to kill me? If I go to the police, what can I tell them? I don't have any evidence that Mickey's planning to kill me. Going to the police might make them change their plans, but I don't want to just stop them. I want to make sure they are punished for plotting against me. Although my main emotion was fiery anger, these and other thoughts were swirling around in my head. Taking a deep breath, I tried to clear my mind and deal with one problem at a time. Since I was going to be stuck in the basement until they both left in the morning, I needed a good night's sleep, so I settled into the chair as comfortably as I could and fell into a deep sleep. In the morning, after hearing both cars leave, I went upstairs to find something to eat. Since the skillet was still on the stove and their breakfast plates were on the table, I didn't worry about making a mess. I fried a couple eggs, made some toast, and heated up the remaining coffee while I ate. I started planning. I was pretty sure I could stop Mickey and her lover from successfully executing their plan, but just in case something went wrong, I decided to make sure they couldn't capitalize on it. From what Nesbitt had said, I would probably have until April, which gave me a couple months to find a way to put an end to the plot and put Mickey and Nesbitt behind bars. For a moment, I thought that if I managed to convince Mickey that I had never cheated on her, would she still want to carry out the plan to destroy me? I thought about it for a moment, but realized it didn't matter even if I had cheated on her, plotting to kill me while she was having fun with that piece of crap. Nesbitt is unforgivable. They both have to pay, over the next 2 weeks. I canceled the life insurance policy, changed my will, leaving everything to the Salvation Army, and kept an eye on our bank and investment accounts. Chapter 7. By the last week of March, I had done everything I could to prepare, but I still didn't have a smoking gun that could put two lovers behind bars. There was one more thing I wanted to do: get into the Nesbitt house. I returned from Memphis on the first Thursday in April, unannounced, and parked my truck at 5 o'clock that evening in a parking lot next to an abandoned Esso service station on Old Marshall Highway. The quickest way to our house from Asheville was north on Old Marshall Highway, past the Esso station, then left on Fletcher Martin Road across the river, then left on Chandler Road. Our house is only a quarter mile in a straight line across the river from where I parked, and I could see it from there, but it's a 15-minute drive from the Esso station to the house. I watched the traffic on Old Marshall Road waiting for Mickey to drive by her. Honda drove by at 5:16 p.m. I waited to see if Nesbitt's red Corvette would follow Mickey home, but the only Corvette I saw on Old Marshall Road was a brand new cobalt blue Vette that passed me 5 minutes after Mickey. I wondered if Nesbitt had bought a new car. Maybe that cobalt blue Vette belonged to him through binoculars. I watched the house until I saw a blue Corvette pull into my garage. I waited a half hour to make sure they weren't leaving again, then drove to Nesbitt's house. His house was in a wooded area, sheltering all the houses in the neighborhood. I parked the car on a nearby street and walked to the house. As far as I could tell, the house had no alarm system. I didn't feel like breaking down the door unnecessarily, so I examined the house from the outside to see if it had a hidden key somewhere. The key was on the ledge above the back door. The house was a ranch-style house with 3 bedrooms, one of which Nesbitt had turned into an office. That's where I began my search. There was a laptop on the desk. The power was on, so all I had to do was press the touchpad and the desktop lit up. I looked around his desk and found a list of all his passwords hidden under the computer, so I had no trouble opening his email. I started looking through the emails, but there was nothing in them that would incriminate him. There were no emails to Mickey, no emails from her, nothing business-related, until I found a letter dated February 3rd. The letter was from a real estate agent in Deadwood, South Dakota. Dear Mr. Mayfield, as your agent in this matter, I am pleased to inform you that Mr. McConnell has agreed to your offer of $1.5 million for the purchase of the Deadwood Saloon, Hotel and Casino on Main Street in Deadwood. I will send you the signed contract via FedEx as soon as I have it. We can arrange for Mr. McReynolds' lawyers to close the deal as soon as they receive your appraisal check from you. Mr. McConnell is hopeful that we can close the deal in early May. I look forward to seeing you when you arrive for the closing of the transaction. Sincerely, Matthew Johnson. What the heck? Nesbitt buys a hotel and casino in Deadwood, South Dakota, using my name. Is that what he's doing with the money we gave him to buy mineral rights from the Owen family? Is that why he needs to take over my identity? Since I printed out the letter and continued looking through his records, I found nothing useful in the rest of the letters. I found a link to his bank account and was able to check it. There was no record of a $500,000 check from our bank being deposited into Nesbitt's account, but there was a check drawn on Nesbitt's account in the name of Mayfield Enterprises, LLC. Had Mickey and Nesbitt set up a company in my name, and what is an LLC? I Googled LLC and learned that it stands for Limited Liability Company. An LLC can easily be created by one or more owners to protect their personal assets from lawsuits filed by the LLC's creditors. Did Mickey and Nesbitt create Mayfield Enterprises, LLC, to buy mineral rights in North Carolina? Or is there something else going on here? Did Mickey invest our $500,000 in the LLC? Is the proposed purchase of the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino an LLC deal? It was becoming like a case of the more you know you don't know. In Nesbitt's bookmarks, I found a link listed only as me. It turned out to be the website of Mayfield Enterprises. On the homepage of the site was a photo of Nesbitt and Mickey, with a caption under the photo listing them as Thomas and Michelle Mayfield, President and Treasurer of Mayfield Enterprises, LLC. Nesbitt had already taken over my identity. The website described Mayfield Enterprises as an investment firm interested in mergers and acquisitions. That was all that was on the company's homepage, which led me to believe that the site was under construction. I searched the internet for information about Mayfield Enterprises, but got no results indicating that the site had not yet been put online. I couldn't find anything else on the computer that would help me understand what Nesbitt and Mickey were doing, since the computer didn't help me anymore. I started going through the desk drawers in the top center drawer. I found a loaded 9mm pistol. I left it where it was and moved to the top left drawer, where I found an open FedEx envelope. Inside the envelope was a contract to purchase the Deadwood Saloon, Casino, and Hotel. According to the contract, Mayfield Enterprises offered $1.5 million for the casino and hotel. The contract was signed by Thomas Mayfield, president of Mayfield Enterprises. But it was not my signature. The handwriting didn't look like Mickey's, so I assumed it was Nesbitt signing my name. I put the contract back down and went to the next drawer, where I found 2 notepads, a blue and a green one. I pulled them out and put them on the table. I opened the green notebook and started reading. The contents of the notebook were maybe 50 pages long, but it detailed what Nesbitt had been doing for the past couple of years. It was written like an outline for a book he was going to write. Only the main characters were Nesbitt, Mickey, and me. Nesbitt sketched out each step of the plan, and then wrote in the details as he went along. Names, places, and times. The outline of the plan began 2 years ago, even before he met Mickey, and continued right up to his plan for my death. Nesbitt began by describing the married couple he hoped to find. They had to be about his age. Both had careers with good incomes and no children, yet the couple had to have recently arrived in the area and have no close relatives nearby. The wife had to be attractive, assertive, and have the confidence of her husband. The husband would have to work hard or travel frequently. He detailed how he managed to find the perfect couple for his scam. He joined LinkedIn and began making connections with professional women throughout the Southeast. That's where he found Mickey. Nesbitt studied both of us until he was convinced we were the right couple for him. Nesbitt described Mickey as smart and beautiful and said he would enjoy seducing her. He described me as a chicken shit, and he seemed to think he would have no trouble turning Mickey against me. He would start by convincing Mickey that I had affairs with women when I worked outside the home. Nesbitt began seducing Mickey in 2011. He tricked his way into a broker seminar that Mickey was attending and convinced Mickey that he was an investment analyst who had recently arrived in Asheville. He discovered that Mickey liked being complimented on how she dressed and how smart she was. Compliments about how attractive she was did not work on her, because she was not a person who needed to be convinced of her attractiveness. It took Nesbitt 3 months to convince Mickey to have lunch with him, but after that they had lunch together at least twice a week. Nesbitt's next step was an anonymous note, in which he told Mickey, "I had an affair while I was working in Tennessee." Once Mickey suspected something, Nesbitt had no trouble incurring her wrath. He managed to convince Mickey to do nothing until she had proof that I was cheating on her. The proof came in the form of another anonymous note with photos attached. The pictures showed a blonde woman having dinner with me, and another picture of the same woman leaving my hotel room. The photos must have been off-photoshopped, because I never had dinner with this woman and never had her in my hotel room. In fact, I had never met the woman in the photos. Once Nesbitt pissed Mickey off enough that she wanted to divorce me. He was able to get her into his bed. The affair started over a year ago, and during that year, Nesbitt told Mickey that he was in love with her and wanted to marry her after he divorced me. But she shouldn't let on that she knew about my cheating just yet. He told her that they need to start hiding the money, so I don't get any of it in the divorce. Nesbitt told Mickey how unfair I had been to her by making her move to North Carolina, away from her friends and family, and then cheating on her every time I went out of town. Nesbitt pissed Mickey off to the point where she claimed she wanted to leave me penniless after the divorce. Then Nesbitt pointed out that North Carolina is a no-fault state, and I would get half of everything in the divorce. When he finally got Mickey to say that, it wouldn't be fair for me to get anything after the way I treated her, Nesbitt offered her a way to get everything. It took several months before she agreed with him and began planning how they could get away with killing me. The idea of buying up the mineral rights was bogus from the start. It was a way to take all our savings and put them somewhere. I couldn't get to them. Mickey told Nesbitt that I knew nothing about financial matters and trusted her completely. If she had told me that buying mining rights was a great investment, I would have believed her. They used the scam to get me to sign the LLC formation papers and hand over all our savings to them. And like a gullible idiot, I agreed. On page 46 of the notebook, Nesbitt wrote that he had already dug a grave at a location 20 miles farther north and provided GPS coordinates. The two of them had decided on the method of my death, but not the time. Nesbitt had a small amount of cyanide, and when the day came, Mickey would simply slip it into my coffee. When I died, Nesbitt would take me to my grave, throw my body in a hole and cover it up. Then Nesbitt would become Tom Mayfield. They'd write a letter of resignation to my boss, sell the house, leave town, and no one would know I was dead. From what I've read, Mickey was involved in the formation of Mayfield Enterprises LLC, but I don't think she knew about Nesbitt's plan to buy the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino, because it appears that her involvement in his plan had a finite date. It appears that Mickey was familiar with most of Nesbitt's plan, but I don't think she would have been very happy if she had read the notebook, especially with what was on the last page. On page 50 was the GPS location of Mickey's pre-dug grave in Colorado. The notepad was a smoking gun, but how could I go to the police with it? I broke into Nesbitt's house and stole his property. Nesbitt could claim that the notebook was exactly what it appeared to be, an outline for a book he wanted to write. Mickey wouldn't like what was in the notebook, but she would go along with Nesbitt's story to cover her butt. So instead of going straight to the police, I decided to meet with the two sorry shits and let Mickey read the notebook. I planned to record the meeting and then call the police. I decided to wait until Friday and see if Nesbitt was going to spend the night with Mickey. I hoped he would say yes, and then I could go back to his house and get the green notebook. I put both notebooks and everything else back where they belonged, then locked the house and put the key on the back door. After that, I spent the night at a motel about 5 miles from Old Marshall Highway. Chapter 8. After breakfast on Friday morning, I entered the GPS coordinates I copied from the green notepad and set out to find my grave. The GPS directed me 15 miles north on Old Marshall Highway to a spot that looked like an old farm trail. I followed the trail for about 500 yards until the GPS showed that I had reached my destination. I had to stop about halfway down a heavily wooded slope that ended in a swamp. I wandered around for about 10 minutes before I found it. There was a pile of dirt lying on a sheet of plywood covered by a trap. Another sheet of plywood lay next to it, covering a hole about 6 feet long and 4 feet deep. So this was to be my final resting place. At 5 o'clock that evening, I parked again at the old Esso station and waited for Mickey to drive by on her way home. She passed by at a 4:45, and I waited until almost 6 o'clock to see if Nesbit would pass by on the way to my house. Not seeing him by 6 o'clock, I stopped by his house. He was home. A blue Corvette was parked in his driveway, so I parked on a neighboring street and watched his house to determine if he had stayed the night. At 6:30, he came out, got in his car, and drove off. I followed him to the Esso station and then waited there to see if he went to the house. 15 minutes later, I saw Nesbit pull into my driveway and immediately headed for the garage. As soon as I saw the garage door close, I drove back to Nesbit's house. I checked Nesbit's email and looked around one more time to see if I had missed anything important. I grabbed a notepad and the contract to buy the Deadwood Saloon, Hotel, and Casino. I was almost out the door when I remembered the gun. My first thought was to make sure it was still in the drawer and not Nesbit's. The gun was in the drawer, and I decided to take it with me for protection. I got home a little after 8 o'clock. I parked my truck on the street, knowing that Nesbit had parked his car in my spot in the garage. I slipped the gun into my waistband behind my right hip and covered it with my coat before entering the house through the garage. As I walked into the kitchen, I heard music and voices in the living room. I placed the notebook on the kitchen table and moved toward the archway leading into the living room, and the scene that appeared before me as I peered around the corner made me feel sick. Both of them were drinking wine, and there was a half-empty bottle on the coffee table as the music played. Neither of them heard me enter the living room. I was so angry at this point that I was tempted to skip the confrontation and just shoot them both. I walked back into the kitchen and put my phone on audio recording. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, then stepped into the room. "I guess you weren't expecting me home this weekend," I said, loud enough to be heard over the music. Nesbit jerked so fast that he fell off the couch, and Mickey shrieked and dropped her wine glass. The scene was almost comical. After the shock of my sudden appearance, Mickey didn't seem all that concerned as she got up and headed upstairs to our bedroom. "Why don't we sit down and wait for Mickey to come back?" "Look, let's not make a big deal out of this," Nesbit said. "You're joking, aren't you? You're entertaining my wife, and I shouldn't make a big deal of it. It looks to me like a very serious matter." Nesbit raised both hands as if to say he understood my point. We sat like that in silence until Mickey came back downstairs in her robe. She looked at me, then at Nesbit. I noticed a slight smirk on Nesbit's face when he said, "I wouldn't mind a cup of coffee, would you, Mickey? Why don't you make some coffee?" When Mickey entered the room, she looked calm, but when Nesbit told her to make coffee, her calm look was replaced by a concerned one. When I saw the look on Mickey's face change, I decided that Nesbit had signaled to Mickey that he wanted her to put cyanide in my coffee. Apparently, Nesbit decided it was time for me to leave, from where I was sitting. I saw Mickey enter the kitchen, pour coffee into the coffee maker, and fill it with water. Then she disappeared from sight. I realized to prepare what she thought would be the last cup of coffee I would ever have. Mickey didn't return to the living room, and the silence in the room began to alarm me. "So how long have you two been playing behind my back?" I asked. Nesbit smirked again and replied, "We've been in love for a little over a year now. We were silent for about 10 minutes, until the coffee maker made the hissing sound it always makes when the last of the water seeps through the grounds." Another 5 minutes passed before Nesbit called out to Mickey, "Hey, honey, if you're not doing anything, why don't you get some coffee?" "In a minute," Mickey replied. It was another 5 minutes before I saw Mickey filling the cups. She put the cups on a tray, carried them into the living room, and set the tray on the coffee table. Mickey placed my cup on the small table sitting next to me, and then handed Nesbit his cup. When she finally sat down, Mickey looked at me with a sad expression on her face. I hoped it meant she regretted what she was doing. Nesbit picked up his cup and took a sip, then looked at Mickey and smiled. I picked up my cup, held it for a second, and put it back down. "It's too hot," I said, and put the cup back on the table. "So, Mickey, why? Why did you let yourself be seduced by that piece of snake excrement?" Nesbit put a smirk back on his face as he sipped his coffee, then turned to Mickey and said, "You can tell him it won't hurt anything now. You were never here. But Dave was. He convinced me that I'd be better off with him than with you." I thought that was an odd answer. She didn't accuse me of cheating, which I expected would have been her first excuse. I also noticed that her answer puzzled Nesbit. He didn't seem satisfied with her answer. I picked up my cup again and said, "That's a pretty flimsy excuse for an affair." Nesbit looked at Mickey and said there was a lot more to it than that. And it wasn't just an affair. Mickey is going to be my wife after your divorce. I pushed the cup away as if about to take a sip and watched for Mickey's reaction. But she was looking at Nesbit. He was watching me, waiting for me to take the fateful sip from my cup. When I set the cup back down again, Nesbit looked annoyed. I decided it was time to put an end to this farce. Mickey, do me a favor and please bring the notebook I left on the kitchen table, I said when Mickey stood up. I pulled the gun from under my jacket, but kept it in plain sight behind my right hip. What notebook? Asked Nesbit. Last night while you were entertaining my wife. I paid a visit to your house and I found an interesting notebook in your desk. I said, the green one that had your plans for Mickey and me in it. When Mickey came back into the room with the notebook, Nesbit snatched it from her and said, "It's just a bunch of nonsense. I wrote for my own amusement. Did you give it to Mickey to read? I think she should." Mickey didn't say a word. She just sat down and stared at Nesbit. "Mickey doesn't need to read it," Nesbit said. "But the police will be interested in reading it when they get here, especially when they find cyanide in the coffee that Mickey made for me. You're both going to find yourselves in very deep crap." Nesbit stood up and headed toward me until he saw the gun in my hand. "Sit back down, loser." And Nesbit picked up his coffee cup and looked like he was going to throw it at me. So I stood up, pointed the gun at his head, and said, "Sit down and shut up." Nesbit sat back down, and so did I. Both Mickey and Nesbit seemed to be waiting to hear what I had to say. Nesbit tried to act calm while sipping his coffee, but Mickey wasn't calm at all. Then Mickey finally spoke up. "Tom, I'm sorry I messed up. You don't have to worry. I didn't put anything in your coffee." Nesbit threw Mickey an angry look and asked, "What did you do?" "I found a notebook in the kitchen while I was making coffee and read it. Everything you told me was a lie. I was ready to destroy Tom because I believed your lies. And now I find out you were planning to destroy me. You jerk. I was so stupid. But not anymore. I put poison in your coffee, loser," Nesbit screamed. "Darn you," and lunged at Mickey, but she backed away from him, causing him to fall to the floor. When he tried to get up, his breathing became hoarse, and his lips seemed to turn blue. He sank to the floor again, his body beginning to convulse. He died a few minutes later. Mickey sat on the couch looking at Nesbit's body and cried when Mickey looked up at me. Tears streaming down her cheeks, she said, "I'm sorry, Tom. You'd better call the police right now. When they get here, I'll tell them I'm the one who put the poison in his coffee." I held the phone in my hand, ready to make the call, and was thinking about what I would tell the police when I realized that I might not come out of this situation unscathed. I looked at Nesbit's body on the floor, and I felt sick to my stomach. So I went into the kitchen and sat down at the table. Mickey followed me and sat across from me. Mickey wrapped her arms around her head and said, "I can't believe I messed up my life like this. I let that jerk ruin our lives. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I deserve everything that's going to happen to me now," Mickey said, when I didn't say anything back. Mickey looked at me and asked, "Aren't you going to call? Will you get me a beer while I think it over?" said I. "Nesbit's in no hurry to go anywhere right now, so why should we be in a hurry?" I sat for 10 or 15 minutes before I took my first sip, then finished my beer before I spoke again. "How do you look at staying out of jail?" said I. "How can I? I destroyed it and you saw me do it. And you have a notebook with his plan to destroy you with my help," said Mickey. "I also recorded our conversation. How many people know about you and Nesbit? No one knows except you. We made sure no one saw us together in public. And I haven't told anyone about our affair," said Mickey. "What did you mean when you asked me if I wanted to avoid jail?" "If you want to stay out of jail, we have to get rid of that loser," I said, pointing to the other room. "Get rid of him? How, since he was kind enough to provide us with an empty grave? We'll go along with his plan with one exception instead of me. That loser will end up in that hole." Mickey's face was pale, almost white, as she looked at me. "Are you going to bury him?" "No, we're going to bury him. I need you to empty his pockets. Give me the car keys, wallet, and everything else he has. You can't do that. He was your lover, and you destroyed him, so you have to do it." Mickey walked to the living room and pulled Nesbit's wallet out of his back pocket, then flipped him over onto his back to go through his front pockets. Finished. She handed me Nesbit's wallet and his keys. "While you get dressed, I'm going to start my truck in the garage," I said. I had to get Nesbit's Corvette out of the garage before I could start my truck sitting in the vet. I couldn't help but think about what it would be like to own a car like that. Then I started worrying about the car. That's something I'll have to think about later. After parking the vet on the street, I drove my truck into the garage as close to the kitchen door as possible. When I returned to the house, Mickey, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, was waiting for me in the kitchen. The two of us dragged the body to the garage and loaded it into the back of my truck. Then I covered it with one of my work tarps. I told Mickey to get in the truck while I myself checked to make sure I had a shovel in hand. Truck in the back of my truck. Chapter 9. The first 10 minutes of the drive went smoothly. Then I asked Mickey why she had betrayed me like that. Dave convinced me that you were cheating on me. He kept telling me he loved me, and I needed to leave you to be with him. What made you want to kill me? Why not just get a divorce? It was about money. Dave told me that by getting rid of you, we could use our combined resources to start Mayfield Enterprises. He said we'd make millions of dollars. He played on my anger. That you cheated on me. I was so gullible. I know you'll never be able to forgive me, and I may never be able to forgive myself. I didn't comment on her answer. Why was he going to take over my identity? You said. Dave said it was to make sure no one would come looking for you. Dave said the plan was to make it look like we quit our jobs, sold the house, and moved to California. When did Nesbitt buy that new Corvette? He picked it out a few days ago. Mickey said the car could be a problem. I said we have to get rid of it so no one will look for Nesbitt. Is there any way we can sell it? Mickey was quiet for a minute, then laughed. You think that's funny? Well, what you just said is a bit funny. The car isn't really a problem. Here's what's funny. Dave arranged for Mayfield Enterprises to rent a car for the president of Mayfield Enterprises. The car is yours. You're kidding. The car is registered to Thomas Mayfield. And since you are Thomas Mayfield, problem solved. The sudden thought of owning this beautiful car excited me, but then I had to come back to the reality of what we were doing. Tell me about Mayfield Enterprises, I said. We created it to buy companies in financial distress and then break them up and sell off the assets. We started with small companies and expanded as our revenues grew, sort of like smash and grab. I said, what does smash and grab mean? It's like if a gang broke into a jewelry store, smashed the windows and grabbed the expensive jewelry, then ran out of the store before the police showed up. Your plan was to enter a small company and trash it, then seize everything of value it owned. You make it sound like we were criminals, if the shoe fits. In any case, I don't think that's what Nesbitt planned to do. What do you know about the Deadwood Saloon, hotel and casino? Said I never heard of it. Mickey replied. I pulled the purchase agreement and a copy of the letter from the real estate agent out of my pocket and held them out to Mickey. She turned on the overhead lights so they could be read when she finished. Mickey only shook her head. It looks like Mayfield Enterprises is going to have to buy the Deadwood Saloon Hotel Casino unless we can find a way to break that contract, Mickey said. He never discussed it with you? No. After that, we were both silent until we got to the burial site. Back home, we also drove in silence. Back at the house. I left the truck in the driveway and parked my Corvette in the garage, and Mickey went into the house. When I walked into the kitchen, Mickey handed me a beer and asked, "What happens now?" "Life goes on as it should. I'll be back in Memphis on Sunday, and on Monday you'll go back to work as usual." I said, "Does that mean we're staying together?" asked Mickey. "No, you and I are over. While I'm in Memphis finishing up my project, you're going to get a lawyer and file for divorce. We won't mention Mayfield Enterprises to anyone. You created it, and now you're going to have to figure out how to break it up so we can get our money back. I can't think about this anymore today. It's been a long day, and I'm tired. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. I'll be in the guest room." Chapter 10. When I went downstairs in the morning, Mickey was already up. "I made coffee," she said. I think she understood my look. "I didn't put anything in it," she said. "I'll have a cup with you." I poured a cup for both of us and sat down across from Mickey. "I've been thinking about our situation. We can't liquidate Mayfield Enterprises," Mickey said. "At least not yet." "Why not?" said I. "What we're most concerned about is the contract to buy the hotel and casino in Deadwood, South Dakota. I reread the purchase agreement again this morning, and there's a clause in it that requires Mayfield Enterprises to pay a 10% down payment for the inspection by April 10th. That's $150,000 that we won't get back if we don't make the purchase. And if we refuse to pay the advance, what happens?" I asked. "They'll sue us, and we'll end up paying $150,000 plus legal fees. We'll have to buy the casino and try to make it work for us. I think we should at least check it out before we give up on it. Besides, your Corvette is leased to Mayfield Enterprises. You don't want to give it up, do you?" Chapter 11. After breakfast, I told Mickey that I was going to take the plywood and tarp from the burial site and put them in Nesbitt's garage, because I didn't want them to be found anywhere near our house today. Then I'm going to start searching his house to make sure there's nothing there to connect us to Nesbitt, or anything that might cause someone to look for the jerk. "I'll come with you," Mickey said. When we got to the house, I told Mickey to search Nesbitt's bedroom and all of his clothes, looking for anything that might connect him to either of us while she was doing that. I went back into the study. I shut down the computer and put it in a box to take with me. I emptied all the drawers. I found some keys in one of the drawers and put them in the box, and I took all the scraps of paper from the desk and put them in the box as well. I was about to throw the blue notebook into the box when it came to my attention that I hadn't even looked in it, at the blue notebook turned out to be another detailed plan for Nesbitt. As far as I could tell, this plan had already been put into action 2 years before Nesbitt started interfering in my life. This time, Nesbitt's victim was a young woman he called simply Claire. He wanted the inheritance she had received from her grandfather. Nesbitt convinced the woman to give him a large sum of money to invest in land in North Carolina. The day after receiving the money, Nesbitt was supposed to leave town and travel to North Carolina. But instead of leaving town, he stole a car and used it to drive Claire's car off the road and into a 100-foot cliff. Afterward, he abandoned the car and left town with the money. When Mickey came into the office, I handed her a blue notebook and said, "Read this. You might feel a little better about what you did." Mickey sat down with the notebook. When she finished reading, she began to cry. He was a monster, and I'm ashamed that I couldn't see him for what he was. I gave her a minute to calm down, and then asked if she had found anything during the bedroom search. A few restaurant receipts. I threw them in the trash. Nothing else. I'll have to come here on Monday to empty his trash can. Is there anywhere else I need to look? No. I've already looked in the hall closet and the kitchen. I shook out the contents of the table into a box. We'll take it with us and take a closer look at the contents when we get home. Back home, Mickey and I went through the papers in the box we'd brought with us and tossed anything that wasn't important to us into the trash. One item of interest was the closing statement on the purchase of the Nesbitt house. It turned out that the house was owned by another LLC called NASCO. I opened Nesbitt's laptop and searched for files related to NASCO and found them hidden in a music folder. I handed the laptop to Mickey so she could read the files while Mickey studied the NASCO files. I continued to sort through the papers. One thing I almost missed was a receipt for a safe deposit box rental at the Asheville Savings Bank. The receipt had Thomas Mayfield's name on it, another step by Nesbitt toward taking over my life. I wondered if the key to the safety deposit box was among the keys I had found in Nesbitt's desk. There were 5 keys, and one of them looked like it might have been meant for a safety deposit box, and another for a mailbox. I mentioned the safety deposit box and mailbox key to Mickey. There's a lot of money tied up in NASCO. The $500,000 Dave invested in Mayfield and came from NASCO, and the balance is about $540,000. In addition to the money, NASCO owns Dave's house, and apparently another house in the Cayman Islands. Nico's address is a P.O. box in Asheville. I'll go to the post office in Asheville tomorrow and see if the key you found will open that box. There may be a problem with the safe. I don't know what we can do about it, Nikki said. I wonder if one of those keys might be to a house in the Caymans. Maybe Nesbitt has a bank account there, said I. We spent the rest of the day talking about Mayfield Enterprises and the probable purchase of the Deadwood Saloon, Hotel, and Casino. We decided that we would have to pay $150,000 in April. Then we would both go to Deadwood in May and see if we could find serious enough problems with the property that would allow us to back out of the purchase agreement without losing the money spent on due diligence. In the meantime, I went back to Memphis and took care of the projects assigned to me, and Mickey went back to her work on Sunday morning before I left. I told Mickey that I hoped that now that Nesbitt was gone, I could trust her not to stab me in the back. You won't have to worry about me. We're both in this together now, and we'll need each other to make it work, Mickey said as I walked out the door. I told Mickey that I would see her in 2 weeks. Chapter 12. Over the next 2 weeks, I finished the 2 projects I was working on in Tennessee and took a week off. When I got home, Mickey brought me up to speed. She told me that she checked the mailbox daily, and the only email other than spam was a Visa bill for NASCO. Mickey said she found Nesbitt's password and was able to log into Tesco's bank accounts and pay the Visa bill. I told Mickey that I was thinking of going to the Cayman Islands and checking out a house owned by Nesbitt. Mickey said she would like to go with me, but couldn't carve out time at work on such short notice. I flew in on Sunday, arriving at 2 p.m. I took a cab from the airport to my home in Grand Cayman. It was a 2-bedroom bungalow with a beautiful view of the Caribbean. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer, so I tried using the keys I had brought with me and was able to open the door. The house was furnished, but had clearly not been lived in for a long time. There was a layer of dust on the furniture, and the house smelled musty due to the fact that it had been closed for a long time. I texted Mickey and told her about the house. She suggested that I hire a cleaning service and contract them to clean the bungalow once a month, unless we called and asked them to get the bungalow ready for guests. Their services would be paid for by NASCO. We planned to use the house as a vacation home and possibly rent it out when we weren't using it. I stayed here until Thursday, enjoying the weather and the beach, and then returned home when I got home. Mickey said she had some ideas she wanted to discuss with me. I think we should merge NASCO with Mayfield Enterprises. Then we can sell Dave's house here and keep the house in the Caymans. Mickey said, "How are we going to do that? You'll have to pretend to be David Nesbitt, so we can go to a lawyer and tell him that you have to give me a power of attorney to act on your behalf. In the merger of NASCO, LLC with Mayfield Enterprises, LLC, how am I going to pass myself off as Nesbitt? I don't look anything like him. Start by growing a mustache. When they grow, I'll darken your hair and style it to look like Dave's hair. I think I can make you look enough like the pictures on Dave's driver's license and passport to impersonate him. I already have a lawyer. He knows me, so he won't get suspicious. I think we can pull this off. As soon as I get the power of attorney, I'll draw up a business agreement to merge the two companies, as well as an agreement to buy out Nesbitt's stake in CEO. How do you plan to pay Nesbitt for his stake in the company? We will open an offshore account in a Cayman bank in Nesbitt's name and transfer the money into that account. We'll take the money back later, Mickey said. One more thing. You need to go to Asheville Savings and Loan and open a safety deposit box. It took me 2 weeks to grow a long enough mustache that looked like a Nesbitt mustache. Mickey dyed and styled my hair to make me look like Nesbitt, so I could fool the lawyer. I was nervous the day of our meeting with the lawyer, but as it turned out, everything went exactly as Mickey had planned. Mickey handled the merger, and I traveled to Asheville to try to access the safe deposit box. I had no problem accessing the safe deposit box. When the woman who escorted me to the vault left me alone with the box, I opened it. The contents of the box came as a surprise to me. There was a .32 caliber pistol, $20,000 in cash, a passport in my name, but with Nesbitt's picture on it, and a checkbook from the Bank of Grand Cayman. The book showed that there was over $1 million in the Grand Cayman bank account. I suddenly felt like my legs were going to give out. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself down, and then continued searching the drawer. There were a few papers that meant nothing to me, so I put them in the briefcase along with the gun money, passport, and savings book. The last thing in the box was a card with phone numbers and what appeared to be passwords. There was no indication of what those passwords were or who the phone numbers belonged to. Back at home, I showed Mickey what I had taken from the safe. The first thing she did was hand me $10,000 and took the other $10,000 for herself. Mickey then sat down at her computer, logged onto the Grand Cayman Bank website, and was able to access Nesbitt's account using one of the passwords on the card I found. "What do we do with the money he has stashed in that bank?" I asked. "Since it's a numbered account, it doesn't have a name." "Now that we have the account number and password, we can handle that money," said Mickey. Mickey changed the account password to make sure no one else could access it. Then she said, "This will be our money. I suggest we leave that money in there and put it aside for a rainy day. Now that we've cut David Nesbitt out of our lives, it's time to move on and try to do something useful with Mayfield Enterprises and the Deadwood Saloon, Hotel, and Casino. That should keep us busy. I suggest we drive down there, look at the property, and see if there is a way to get out of the deal. If not, we'll have to start learning how to run the hotel and casino." Chapter 13. Thursday, December 19th, 2013. An hour earlier, I had finished my last meeting with the contractor and decided to grab a drink before heading home. For an hour, I sipped a double bourbon, mentally analyzing the past year. It had been 10 months since my life had been turned upside down. In February, when I found out that Mickey had not only cheated on me, but was planning with her lover to kill me. The confrontation between Mickey and Dave Nesbitt had led to Nesbitt's death. Now, 10 months later, instead of being the project manager at SAC, I am the president and CEO of Mayfield Enterprises, and Mickey is the CFO. In May, Mickey and I traveled to Deadwood, South Dakota, to do a final inspection of the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino to see if we could find a way to avoid the purchase agreement and recover the $150,000. It turned out that the property was exactly as described in the offer for sale, so there was no way to cancel the purchase agreement. We made a $500,000 down payment and obtained a business loan for the rest of the purchase price, and Mayfield Enterprises LLC became the owner of the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino. The mansion was in need of renovation, so I moved to Deadwood to manage the project, and Mickey stayed in North Carolina and continued to work in a brokerage firm while managing the financial affairs of Mayfield Enterprises. The Deadwood Hotel and Casino, as Mickey and I renamed it, had been a busy hive of activity over the past few months as we completely renovated the building in preparation for the grand opening on Saturday, December 21st. I finished my drink and took another look around the saloon we had named the 1870 Mayfield Saloon. I was proud of the look that had been created. Walking through the doors of the saloon was like stepping back in time to the 1870s, and I was still feeling good about the renovations as I walked to my truck. I still have the Vet, but you can't drive a Corvette around Deadwood in the winter. As I reached to open the truck door, a voice behind me asked if I was Tom Mayfield. I answered yes, and turned around to see who was addressing me. But before I could react, I was attacked by 3 men. 2 of them put my hands behind my back and tied my wrists, while the third put a sack over my head. I tried to get free, but my attackers pressed me against the wall of the building and held me down. I started to say something, but one of the men kicked me in the kidneys and told me to shut up. We stood like that for a few minutes until I heard the sound of a car pulling up. As soon as the car stopped, I was shoved into the back seat and then forcefully laid on the floor. I had no idea what these people wanted from me, and it scared the heck out of me. All sorts of ideas started swirling around in my head. Was this really about Deadwood? Had Mickey decided to betray me again and kill me to gain full control of Mayfield Enterprises? I don't know how long we were in the car. I think about half an hour before we stopped, and I heard the garage door open, and then the car pulled inside. When the garage door closed, I was pulled out of the car and forced to walk between 2 men. They have dragged me up some steps and led me into the house. We walked down a hallway and into a room, where they sat me in a chair and told me to keep my mouth shut. With the bag over my head, the only thing I could see was part of the wooden floor beneath my feet. "We got him," one of my captors said. "Was he giving you trouble?" This was said by a man with deep gravel in his voice. Then laughter broke out. "No trouble at all. Go get CJ," said the gravelly voice. Chapter 14. Who the heck was CJ? I didn't know anyone named CJ, and couldn't figure out what was going on. A few minutes passed before I heard someone enter the room. I immediately realized it was a woman, because I heard the sound of her heels on the wooden floor as she approached me. When she came closer, I could smell her perfume. Her scent was intoxicating. Then, without warning, something hit me hard on the left side of my jaw. The impact made my head fall sideways and I was numb for a moment. I tensed, expecting another blow, but instead a bag was pulled off my head. It took me a few seconds to focus on the vision in front of my face. Large, dark brown eyes, a beautiful face, and long, dark, almost black hair. We stared at each other for a moment. Then I noticed the scars, one on my forehead and one on my chin. The scars were faint and didn't detract from the woman's beauty. After staring at me for a few seconds, the woman, what I assumed was CJ, turned and shouted, "That's not him. You brought me the wrong man. I didn't know if that was good news or bad news. This is Tom Mayfield, the guy you sent us to capture," one of my captors said. "Darn it, Jimmy. I gave you a picture of Howard. I don't know who this guy is." Then she turned to me again. "Who the heck are you?" "I'm Tom Mayfield. That can't be right," she said. "Do you know Howard Mason?" "No, never heard of him." I said. She looked at me again, then turned to the middle-aged man sitting at the table and said, "Why can't these idiots do anything right? They had to look at him to make sure he looked like the man in the picture I gave them. If Howard was in Deadwood, he's probably gone by now." CJ calmed down. The man behind the desk had the same gravelly voice I'd heard earlier. "You said the Corvette salesman said his name was Tom Mayfield," Jimmy said, then pointed at me. "And he said his name was Tom Mayfield." I felt sick to my stomach. "Can I see the picture you're talking about?" 5 people in the room looked at me. "Jimmy, give me that picture," CJ said. Then CJ took the picture from Jimmy and held it in front of me. A cry of "oh crap" went off in my head. "You know this guy?" CJ said, pointing to David Nesbitt in the photo. Nesbitt was standing next to a 2013 cobalt blue Corvette, the same one in my garage, and I couldn't think of any lie that could get me out of the shitstorm I was in, so I told the truth, at least part of it. I knew him as David Nesbitt. I said, "He's a crook who tried to rip me off and steal my identity. Where is he? These clasps are cutting into my wrists. If you cut them, I'll tell you. I said, fearing they'd decide to beat the information out of me anyway. But I had to take my chances before I lost all feeling in my hands. Jimmy let him go, CJ said when my hands were free. I answered her question. The last time I saw him was in North Carolina, and he had just bought the car pictured. Judging by CJ's anger, I guessed that she had also been his victim. So I asked, how much did he take from you? CJ pulled up a chair and sat across from me. What makes you think he took anything from me? He's a con man, that's what he does. He obviously changed his name after he left you. So you couldn't find him. And that right cross you hit me with tells me you're very angry with him. Howard took a little over half $1 million from me. It was an inheritance from my grandfather, and I want it back. I've known the loser as David Nesbitt for the last 2.5 years. When did that happen to you? I met him 5 years ago. He was supposed to use my money to buy some land in North Carolina. He told me that we could then sell that land to real estate developers at a big profit. I was supposed to join him in Raleigh a few days after he left, but the next day I was in a severe car accident and was in the hospital for several days. When I was finally able to get out of the hospital, I couldn't find him. Been looking ever since. Darn. I already knew CJ's story. Nesbitt or Mason or whoever he was had written down what happened to CJ in a blue notebook. Doesn't the S in CJ stand for Claire by any chance? How do you know? I have information you need to familiarize yourself with, but it's at my house in Deadwood. If you go there with me, I'll show you what I have. I think that will fill in the blanks for you, I said. Why should I trust you? What have you got to lose? You can take Jimmy and his friends with you. You better not be fooling me. Jimmy was ready to zipper up my arms again, but when CJ saw that my wrists were already damaged, she stopped him. Chapter 15. On the drive back to Deadwood, I rode in the back seat between Jimmy and a guy named Dan with CJ driving. When we pulled up to the house, I told Jimmy that I needed to get something out of the safe, and I wanted him to know that I had a gun in the safe. I don't want any accidents, so I'll open the safe, and you can get the gun, I said. I could see that Jimmy wasn't sure about me, but he followed me into the office and watched as I dialed the combination, swung the door open, and let Jimmy come in and get the gun. I then pulled out 2 notepads and carried them into the living room where CJ was waiting for me. I prefer to keep this between the two of us as much as possible, so I'll have Jimmy and Dan wait in the kitchen. Jimmy looked at CJ, and she nodded in agreement. Then there's beer in the fridge and liquor on the counter, I said. I then turned to CJ. I'm going to make myself a bourbon. Would you like something before we get started? It's not a date, and we're not going to have love afterward, CJ said with a slight smile. It was nice to see that she had a sense of humor. That would be fun, I said. But I think you need a drink when you've seen everything I have to show you. Besides, I don't date girls who need chaperones. That elicited a small chuckle from CJ. Okay, I guess I'll have some bourbon on the rocks. Jimmy and Dan sat in the kitchen, each with one of my beers, and kept an eye on me while I sat in the living room with CJ. How did you find that picture you were showing me? I asked. Howard had a Corvette when I met him, and he told me that he leases a new Corvette every 3 years. I gave this information and a picture of Howard Mason to my private investigator. And he somehow found a Corvette dealer in Asheville, North Carolina, who was leasing him a car. The dealer said that the guy in the picture was the one who had leased the car, and that his name was Tom Mayfield. The picture was taken when Howard was picking up the car. I'm impressed. Your private investigator managed to find a needle in a haystack. But how did you end up in Deadwood? A Google search, your name came up in connection with a hotel. I called the number associated with the hotel and asked the girl who answered the phone if you were Tom Mayfield from North Carolina. She confirmed that it was you. I told CJ the story of how Mickey and I ended up in the Asheville area. I then told her about how I found out that Mickey was having an affair with Nesbitt. I discovered that not only was Mickey having fun with that loser behind my back, but she was planning to destroy me. After that, I was determined to find out everything the two of them were up to. I paid a visit to Nesbitt's house while the loser was at my house with Mickey. That's where I found the notebooks. I handed the green notebook to CJ and told her about Nesbitt's plan, how he was going to kill me, steal my identity, and then kill Mickey. You're still here. So what happened to your wife and Howard or Nesbitt? I just call him in loser to avoid confusion, I said. How did you stop them? And where are they now? I'll get to that later, I said, and put the blue notepad in front of CJ. I'm going to go to the kitchen and freshen up our drinks. I think you'll want some alone time while you read the contents of this notepad. I got up and took our glasses into the kitchen and put more ice and bourbon in them. I carried CJ's glass back into the room, set it next to her, and watched her read the first couple pages of the notebook, then returned to the kitchen. It took CJ 20 minutes to finish reading the notebook. When she was done, she put her head in her hands and started crying. When I entered the room, CJ looked at me and cried. He tried to kill me. It wasn't an accident. He forced me off the road into a cliff and left me there to die. I trusted the jerk, and he tried to kill me. Now every time I look at those ugly scars, I'll think of how that loser CJ stood up and walked to the kitchen. She handed the car keys to Jimmy and said, "You two go back inside. Tom and I have something to talk about." "Are you sure?" said Jimmy. "It seems that Tom and I belong to an exclusive club that neither of us wants to join." And we said, CJ, looking back at me, "don't want to talk about it in front of outsiders." As they walked out, Jimmy handed my gun to CJ just in case. I said when they left. CJ handed the gun to me. "You're not a threat to me, are you?" No, I'm not." CJ went back into the kitchen and poured herself another bourbon. When she returned, I asked her about the scars. Did they come from the accident? When was that, I think? It wasn't an accident. It happened in April 2010. What do you think happened? I drove off the road into a cliff, flew 105 and landed front end on the rocks on the shore of Lake Erie. That's all I know about what happened when they pulled me out of the car. I was unconscious and didn't regain consciousness for 2 whole days. I don't remember anything about what happened, and the police couldn't find anyone who witnessed the accident. The scars were left from the airbag hitting me in the face. It's bad enough that I'll have these ugly scars for the rest of my life, but now they'll be a constant reminder of what a big fool I was for letting that man into my life. Those scars don't detract from your beautiful face. I think they give you an air of mystery. I could sit here and stare at you all night without being distracted by them. CJ's face flushed slightly and she laughed. "You're still trying to get me into your bed, aren't you? Is it working?" "No." "Okay, now tell me the rest of the story." I told CJ about the night of the confrontation and how when the loser sent Mickey to make coffee, she read the notebook and discovered that Nesbitt was playing with her and that he was planning to kill her too. "Mickey put cyanide in the loser's coffee and he died a few minutes later," I said. "And what did the police do?" asked CJ. "Nothing. We never called the police." I opened my green notepad and pointed to the part about the grave the loser had dug for me, with the GPS coordinates of its location. "Nesbitt is now lying in this grave he made himself." "Why didn't you call the police?" "I was going to. But I realized that if I called the police, it could cause me financial problems. Nesbitt and Mickey had all our money tied up in Mayfield Enterprises. I was worried that a police investigation would result in the assets of Mayfield Enterprises being frozen, and it could take years to get my money back. I could spend a fortune on legal fees trying to get the money released. And what happened to your wife, Mickey? We got divorced. It may sound strange, but she's my business partner now. I'm not very knowledgeable about financial and business matters. It's Mickey's world. Mickey handles the financial part of our business, and I handle the physical management." We sat in silence for a few minutes, and then CJ put her head down and started crying again. I didn't know what to do. An attempt to hug her might not have been accepted, so I stayed silent, wiping the tears from her eyes. CJ looked up at me and said, "I was hoping that I would find Howard here in Deadwood and make him give me my money back. Now that he's dead, I'll never get it back." I had to think about that for a while. We talked for a couple more hours. I found out that CJ's name was Claire Johnson. She was a CPA, taught accounting at a community college in Erie, and worked part-time for an accounting firm during tax season. Jimmy, Dan, and my third captor worked for CJ's father. Mr. Johnson was a man with gravel in his voice. He ran a trucking company in Erie, Pennsylvania. Mr. Johnson rented the house they brought me to so they would have a place near Deadwood while they waited for the right opportunity to grab me. If I were Howard, Mason, would your father have ordered me killed? CJ smiled at me and replied, "I don't know, maybe that's not funny." I said, "If you could see the look on your face, you'd be laughing too." CJ was starting to like me, but I was still questioning whether I should trust her completely. "Do you want me to take you back to the house? I've had more bourbon than I'm used to. I'm tired and sleepy. And besides, I'd like to spend the night away from my father and his 3 statues." The 4 of them are sitting in the house drinking beer, burping and farting. "Not the most pleasant environment for an impressionable girl like me," CJ said, then laughed. "Do you have a guest bedroom?" "Yes. Can I sleep here tonight? And could you lend me a t-shirt so I can sleep in it?" Chapter 16. I got up early in the morning and CJ was still asleep in the guest room. I made coffee and then called Mickey and told her what happened last night. I told her who CJ was and that she was the victim. Described in the blue notebook. How sure are you? Mickey said before I went to bed. I went to the website of the SCTV station in Air, Pennsylvania. I was able to go through their news files from 2010 and found a video related to CJ's accident. It was all there. So what do you want to do? Said Mickey. Right? I'm with you. Do what you have to do. Shortly after my conversation with Mickey, CJ came out of the guest room. I need coffee, she said. CJ sat down at the table and drank 2 cups of coffee without saying anything. So what now? I said. I think I'm going back to the house to pack up and head to Erie tomorrow. When you're ready, I'll take you back to the house. While CJ got dressed, I checked the weather and looked outside to make sure the roads were dry. If the weather was bad or there was snow on the roads, I would have to call a cab to take us to Deadwood to get my truck. Or we could drive the Corvette. I don't drive the Vet unless the roads are dry and there is no precipitation in the forecast. The weather was clear and the roads were dry. When CJ came back, I told her we would drive my car, and she followed me into the garage. When she saw the Corvette, CJ froze. What are you doing with that car? It's the same car that was in the picture with Howard. Why do you have it now? Did you forget that loser told the car salesman his name is Tom Mayfield? The car is registered in my name, so I decided to keep it. It took a minute for that thought to take shape, and then CJ said, "That makes sense now." Pulling the Corvette into the garage, I asked CJ where the house was. You've been there and you don't know where it is. I had a bag over my head on the way there, and on the way back, I sat in the back seat between Punch and Judy, and didn't see anything that would tell me where I was. The house is in Sturgis before we even left Deadwood. I had decided what I was going to do. I was confident in my decision, even though there was some risk involved. After you sort out everything that needs to be done around the house, would you mind coming back to Deadwood and having lunch with me? I have something important to discuss with you. What's that? You'll have to go back to Deadwood to find out. I'll meet you at the hotel. It was 12:30 when CJ walked into the hotel lobby. I met her at the door and escorted her back outside to Patty O'Neill's Irish pub for lunch. During lunch, CJ asked me several times why I wanted to talk to her. I replied that she would have to wait until after lunch. After lunch, I drove CJ back to the Deadwood Hotel and went up to my office on the 2nd floor. CJ watched me silently as I opened the computer and turned on the 50-inch display on the wall. I brought up a spreadsheet on the computer and flipped it to the big screen. "What's this?" asked CJ. "It's a spreadsheet." "Yes, I know what a spreadsheet is. I mean, what are you trying to show me here?" "It's for the Deadwood Hotel and the Casio in Mayfield, 1870 saloon. You see, the purchase price is $1.5 million. The purchase price is $1.5 million. The remainder of the $350,000 down payment paid by Mayfield Enterprises, and the $1 million paid by a business loan that Mayfield Enterprises took out from a bank in Rapid City. It also lists all the fees, taxes, real estate commissions, and other expenses paid at closing. I'm a tax preparer. You don't need to explain it to me. I know how to read spreadsheets," CJ said, slightly annoyed. "Okay. And this one," I said. "Opening another spreadsheet is for Mayfield Enterprises. I assume you can read this one as well. On this screen, I want to indicate the source of the seed capital invested in Mayfield Enterprises in March 2012. Mickey and this loser created Mayfield Enterprises. And Mickey put our $500,000 into Mayfield Enterprises instead of using it to buy mineral rights from landowners in North Carolina, as I was told. And that loser invested his $500,000. The other $890,000 came from Mayfield Enterprises' merger with Nasco, LLC, which was created by Mickey's friend Nesbitt. Turns out Invesco held $400K plus the loser's house, which we were able to sell after the merger for $490K. I looked at CJ and she was busy studying a spreadsheet. That's an interesting story, but why are you telling me about it? I wanted you to see it all because you have a decision to make. I see you haven't realized it yet, but that loser, your Howard Mason or my David Nesbitt, had almost $1.5 million that we now have in Mayfield Enterprises. It makes sense that the $500,000 that loser took from you as part of that $1.5 million. CJ put her hand to her mouth and said, "Oh my God, I have 2 offers for you. The first is to give you back the $500,000. If that's what you want, we're going to have to find a way to give you that money. We can't just write you a check because you'll end up having to pay income tax on that money. And we don't want to have to explain to the IRS the source of that money. Mickey has offered to buy a $500,000 annuity. That will give you an additional $2,000 a month for the next 20 plus years, with the interest that would accrue on that money. You would end up with more than the original $500,000. We are open to other ideas if you have them. My second suggestion is that you leave your money invested in Mayfield Enterprises and become an equal partner with me and Mickey. You will become our CFO and accountant for all of Mayfield Enterprises. You will be paid a salary plus benefits and bonuses based on the profitability of Mayfield Enterprises. What will I do with my teaching position? You could continue to do it and do Mayfield Enterprises accounting remotely on your own time. Or you could come here to work and take a more active role in Mayfield Enterprises, which is what I would prefer you do. I thought your ex-wife was the CFO. Mickey will be listed as vice president and will be responsible for finding investment opportunities and new business ventures. I said, that's a lot to think about. How soon would I have to give you an answer? I can give you 2 weeks. I'll need to find someone to fill the accounting position if you decide not to make partner. Wow. My head is spinning, but that's the best I've felt since the car accident. It's nice to know that I haven't lost everything. I'll think about what you're offering me and give you an answer as soon as I can. CJ and her father stayed the weekend because she wanted to attend the grand opening of the Deadwood Hotel Casino and Mayfield's 1870 saloon. The opening was a success. The hotel was empty and the casino was full, despite it being December in South Dakota. I was busy most of the day, but I saw CJ happily playing the slots, and I spotted her father playing blackjack in the saloon. The next morning, CJ, her father, and the 3 statues headed back to Erie. I spent the next few days waiting for a call from CJ, hoping she would accept the partnership offer and return to Deadwood for work. When I hadn't heard from CJ by Friday, I began to think that she would decide to get an annuity and stay in Erie, and I would never see her again. That made me sad. I had grown very fond of her and wanted a chance to make her mine. CJ never called me. She just showed up at my house on Saturday and said, "Your new partner is here and ready to get to work." She then gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek for the next 2 months. CJ lived in my spare bedroom, and then one night she told me she had found an apartment she liked on the 2nd floor of one of the old buildings next to the Deadwood Hotel. I didn't want her to leave. "I wish you weren't leaving," I said. CJ put her arm around me and said, "Why do you want me to stay here?" I almost said I was in love with her, but changed my mind and replied, "Because it feels so good when you hug me like this. If it feels so good to you, what if we do something?" CJ and I have never been on a date, so I wasn't expecting this night to be about doing it with her. Just the thought of what we were going to do was getting me to the point where I was getting uncomfortable. After that first night together, CJ hadn't moved out, nor did she officially move in with me. She left all her clothes and other belongings in the spare bedroom, but she never slept there again. Every night, she went to my bed. Chapter 17. CJ and I had been together for about 2 months when Mickey finally came to Deadwood to meet her. It was interesting to watch them look out for each other. In the end, it was Mickey who broke the ice. I think we have something in common. We both fell in love with 2 of the same guys, one good and one really bad. CJ laughed and said, "You're right." I went outside to answer the phone, and when I came back in, CJ said, "Mickey and I are leaving for lunch. I'll see you in a couple hours." Then they left. I didn't know if that was good or bad for me. When they came back, it was obvious that they had had a few cocktails along with lunch. They were both in good spirits and acted like they were old friends. Later that afternoon, I was alone with Mickey, and she filled me in on the situation. She told me that she had met a nice man, and they had been dating for several months. His name was Jimmy Hogan, and he was a doctor with his practice in Asheville. She told me that they spent New Year's Eve at a house in the Caymans. After telling me about her personal life, she offered to bring CJ back to the room so we could discuss Mayfield Enterprises business. The next morning, the 3 of us were in my office at the hotel when I received a call from the girl working at the front desk. She said there was a man in the lobby who wanted to talk to me. He would not give his name or say why he wanted to talk to me. I told the girl to send him to my office. The man who entered the office was short, stocky, and bald. He was dressed in a light gray coat and looked like a police detective from an old TV show. "My name is Leander Mossman," he said. I introduced myself and then introduced Mossman to my business partners, CJ and Mickey. "So how can I help you? I'm a private investigator from New Orleans, and I'm looking for a man named Larry Taylor." "I don't know anyone by that name," I said. Mossman held out a picture to me and said, "This is Larry Taylor. Do you recognize him?" I handed the picture to CJ and she showed it to Mickey. The picture showed a younger Nesbitt. "I don't think I've ever met him," I said, and then asked Mickey if she knew him. "I've never seen him before," Mickey said. CJ remained silent. "Why are you looking for him here?" said I. Mr. Taylor stole money from some people in New Orleans a few years ago, and they hired me to find Mr. Taylor, said Mossman. But why are you looking for him here? Said I. Mr. Taylor defrauded my clients by investing in a casino. He said he was going to buy in Deadwood and then disappeared with their money. It's the only casino that's been sold to a new owner in the last 10 years. So I came to see if that new owner was Larry Taylor. This casino hotel and Mayfield's 1870 saloon were purchased by Mayfield Enterprises last May. Your Larry Taylor had nothing to do with our business, said Mickey. So who owns Mayfield Enterprises? Asked Mossman. The three of us own the company, said CJ. It's a nice place you have, said Mossman. We've put a lot of money, blood, sweat, and tears into it, and we're starting to get a return on our investment. I said, well, it's been a long try. Looks like it's another dead end, Mossman said. How much did this Taylor guy steal from you clients? Asked CJ. A total of about $700,000 in. I wouldn't want to be in Taylor's shoes when your clients find him, I said. Mossman thanked us for our time and left as he walked out of my office. I put my finger to my mouth so CJ and Mickey wouldn't say anything. Well, that was interesting, I said. I hope we never fall for a scam like that. Anyway, let's get back to what we were doing. The three of us didn't say a word about our visitor until we were back in the house. Do you think he suspects we lied to him? Asked TJ. I don't. He seems to have accepted what we told him. But to be safe, we need to bury what happened in the past and never go back to it, I said. Chapter 18. Since opening last December, our Deadwood property has exceeded our expectations from April through the end of September. The hotel's occupancy rate was about 80% and approached 100% on weekends. The casino was busy every day in October. Business slowed down, and I asked CJ if she would like to go on vacation to the Cayman Islands. She was more than willing. On our first night at the Grand Cayman House, I proposed to CJ, and her response was an enthusiastic yes, after which she gave herself to me as a reward. She rewarded me every day we were there, and I never complained. Our wedding was held at the Deadwood Town Hall, and then there was a reception at Matt Field's 1870 saloon. Mickey and her boyfriend were there, along with a few of our friends from Deadwood and some hotel staff. Later that year, Mickey and her boyfriend were married in Las Vegas. CJ and I were there as witnesses by June 2016. CJ and I had a 1-year-old daughter, Brittany, and another baby on the way. Near the end of the month, I received a call from Greg Hadley, the casino's head of security. Greg told me that he had observed 2 men walking around the casino, as if checking it out. According to him, they took some pictures and then headed into the saloon. I told Greg to meet me at the saloon, and I headed downstairs to see what these men were doing. Greg and I entered the saloon and immediately noticed the men. They were dressed in business suits and didn't look like potential robbers, but they were taking pictures of the saloon. I approached them and said, "My name is Tom Mayfield, and I am one of the owners of this establishment. May I ask what you are doing here?" One of the men replied, "I'm John Benson, and this is my assistant, Bill Martin. We're here looking for potential investments. We've been in town all week, and this is the best real estate we've seen." "You're right. This is the best real estate in Deadwood. But it's not for sale. I said you haven't heard our offer yet." "I'm listening. I said we're thinking about $4 million for the hotel, casino, and saloon." I was surprised by the offer, but I didn't give any sign of it. That property would generate that kind of profit every 2 years. It would take a lot more than that to get us to sell it. "So you might actually be interested in selling?" "I didn't say that. I just said it would take a lot more than $4 million to convince us to sell. I said, who is interested in buying this property? The people we represent have wished to remain anonymous. We will contact you in a few days and see if we can change your mind." Benson said when Benson and Martin left. I asked Greg if he had recorded the conversation, and he said every word. I wasn't sure if these guys would come back with a better offer, or if they had some other idea on how to get us to sell them the property. I went back to my office and asked CJ to come in, and then called Mickey. I turned on the tape that Greg had made of my conversation with Benson and Martin. "What do you think? Is this a legitimate offer, or do you think they're screwing us over?" said I. No. "Do you think they believed you when you said the property was bringing in $2 million a year?" asked Mickey. "I don't think they believed me, but I guess they wanted to buy the property anyway. I don't know what they're up to, so we'd better be careful in dealing with them." "What if they come back and offer $5 million?" said CJ. "Maybe we should take it." The three of us were silent for a minute. Then Mickey said, "If they come back and make an offer, try making a counteroffer and see how they react." "How far should we go with a counteroffer?" I asked. Mickey laughed and said, "Let's see how serious they are. Whatever they offer, make a counteroffer for $1 million more if they go for it." I say we sell to them and then get the heck out of Dodge. Benson and Martin came back 2 days later and offered $5 million, and I said we wouldn't sell for less than $6 million. Benson didn't even blink. He said he needed to make a call and he'd get back to me. The two of them came back less than half an hour later and said they accepted our counteroffer. They didn't even ask to see the financials of the business. This convinced me that they needed the Deadwood Hotel and Casino for more than just generating revenue. I talked to CJ and Mickey, and we accepted Benson's offer. It took 2 months to finalize the deal and transfer the property to Benson or whoever he represented. Once all the papers were signed, CJ, Brittany, and I got in our Toyota Highlander and drove to Asheville, North Carolina. We had already bought a house in Asheville, and the furniture had been delivered to us a week ago, along with the Corvette. I had settled my issues with Mickey and no longer held a grudge against her. This allowed CJ, Mickey, and I to work closely together to make Mayfield Enterprises a success. I even talked to Mickey and CJ into letting Mayfield Enterprises buy 3 Standard Auto Services Corporation franchises in Southern Virginia, near the North Carolina border. Our second child, a boy we named Thomas Mayfield Jr., was born in October, and Mickey announced she was pregnant and due in April. The next twist in my story occurred in April, shortly after Ashley, Mickey's little girl, was born. I was in my home office when I received a call on my work phone. The caller identified himself as Agent James Seymour. He said he was an investigator for the Internal Revenue Service and wanted to speak with me. I felt a knot in my stomach as I pondered the possible reasons why the IRS wanted to talk to me. I knew our tax returns for the past few years had been clean, but if they audited Mayfield Enterprises for 2012 and 2013, they might start asking questions about where all the money used to create Mayfield Enterprises came from. I invited Mr. Seymour into the house and called Mickey to tell her what was going on, and that she should come over too. CJ was already home, and Mickey arrived a few minutes before James Seymour. When I opened the door for him, Agent Seymour showed me his badge and said, "I'm Agent James Seymour, and you are Thomas Mayfield." I confirmed that I was, and invited Agent Seymour into the house. I led Agent Seymour into the living room, introduced him to CJ and Mickey, and offered him a cup of coffee. He replied that he would be happy to have a cup. As we all sat down for coffee, Agent Seymour began to speak. "The reason for my visit is to ask you some questions about the sale of the Deadwood Hotel and Casino to the Treadway Syndicate." The Treadway Syndicate. That's the first time we've heard that name. We've never known the actual buyers. We only dealt with their agents, and they never told us who they represented. "Were there any problems with the sale?" I asked. "No, not on your part. Treadway has made some, I would say, interesting purchases of businesses over the years, such as your Deadwood facility. What caught my eye was the price. They paid $6 million for a business that was only bringing in $900,000 a year. Treadway has a habit of overpaying for properties they buy. So did you advertise the sale, or did they approach you on their own?" "We weren't planning to sell Deadwood at the time. Their agents came to me and offered me $4 million, but I declined. They raised their offer to $5 million. We offered $6 million, and they agreed to the deal." "You didn't think the offer was too high for this property?" asked Agent Seymour. "Of course we did. But their $6 million is a lot of money, and it allowed us to pursue a new business opportunity. I will say that their offer made me suspicious. The thought crossed my mind that they might be using the casino to launder money, but I figured it was best not to ask questions and just take their money. I said, "Have you had any contact with anyone associated with the Deadwood Hotel and Casino since the sale?" "No, I haven't." "So what do you think is going on?" I said. "I'm not at liberty to say anything more about our investigation," Agent Seymour said. He gave me his card and asked me to call him if anyone from the hotel contacted us. Then he thanked us for our time and left. "The IRS knows a lot more about what's going on in Deadwood than we'll ever know." I said, "I wonder if the IRS investigated us when we bought the hotel." "I wouldn't be surprised," Mickey said. Chapter 19. The final twist in my story came in June. Mickey, her husband Jimmy, and Ashley had come over to our house to party, and while we were enjoying adult beverages, I heard the phone ringing in my office. I was tempted to just send it to voicemail, but I decided to take the call. I was on the phone for over half an hour before I went back outside and joined the others. CJ looked at me and asked, "What's wrong?" I tried to keep a concerned expression on my face, but I couldn't hold it for long. As the smile started to spread across my face, I said, "You won't believe what that call was about. Don't just stand there in a pole. Start talking." CJ said the call was from the police chief and the mayor of Deadwood. They told me that Greg Hadley, who was still head of security for the Deadwood Hotel and Casino, came to the Deadwood Police Department and told them that he had seen suspicious activity late last night. He said that a box truck pulled up to the back of the hotel, unloaded several boxes, took them down to the basement, and locked them in one of the rooms. Greg said he managed to get into the room and opened one of the boxes. It was full of drug packages, and Greg brought several packages to the police station as evidence of what he had found. The chief obtained a search warrant and then contacted the South Dakota State Police to assist in the search. The next morning, 10 officers from the Deadwood Police Department and 20 South Dakota State Police officers were ready to go on the scene with the warrant. By noon, police found 10 pounds of heroin that had been cut with fentanyl and packaged in bags. Hotel and casino management was arrested, and all employees were questioned. The next day, FBI and IRS agents raided Deadwood. They were upset that the local police had been the first to respond. A joint investigation revealed that the Treadway Syndicate not only smuggled drugs through the hotel, but also used the casino to launder drug proceeds. Deadwood police and state police quickly invoked South Dakota's asset forfeiture law and took possession of the Deadwood Hotel and casino property. The mayor said they called me to see if we would be interested in purchasing the hotel and casino from the city of Deadwood and the state of South Dakota. They are offering us the property for $2 million. CJ said, "Holy crap," and then covered her mouth with her hand and said, "Sorry." "How soon do we have to make a decision?" asked Mickey. They said, "We have a couple weeks to make a decision. But we shouldn't wait too long because the feds are trying to get their cut, and that could drive up the price. You know, this ad could make the Deadwood Hotel famous. We could raise room rates and maybe get more visitors," CJ said. "We could do that, but I don't want to live there permanently. We'd have to find reliable people to run the business, so we'd only have to visit once every couple months." "What do you say?" Mickey replied. "Let's do it," and CJ agreed. Epilogue, March 20th, 20. Ever since we bought out the Deadwood Hotel and Casino, things have been booming. Since opening, the hotel, casino, and saloon have been bringing in a little over $1.5 million a year, and our other businesses are doing quite well. The only dark spot in our future is the COVID-19 pandemic, which is just starting to gain momentum in the United States. No doubt Mayfield Enterprises will take a financial hit, but CJ, Mickey, and I have enough money in the Grand Cayman Bank to survive this pandemic. We are worried about all of our employees. We plan to keep them on the job as long as we can. It still amazes me that all the good things that have happened to me in the last 7 years started with a sociopathic con man who was willing to kill to achieve his goal of getting rich by taking other people's money. Now he is no longer alive, rotting in a grave he didn't realize he was digging for himself. I am now the president and CEO of the company he created in my name. I took over his Corvette. We took control of NASCO, the company that was set up to launder his money. We gained control of his numbered account in the Cayman Islands, as well as his home there. And finally, we became the owners of the hotel and casino he wanted for himself. On top of that, if that loser hadn't interfered in my life, I never would have met CJ. In the end, that loser's greed ruined him and made me a happy and rich man